Who's ready to talk about webinars? Webinars are an incredible way to not only sell your digital products or your services or whatnot, but also just teach an audience and grow your list. But yeah, a lot goes into recording and publishing a successful webinar. So I've compiled all my best tips for you today. I've been doing webinars for several years. I've gotten several thousands of dollars worth of sales from my own webinars. I have like 13 different ones I've done, different webinars on different topics over the past years. And I got my best tips. So I've broken these up into a few different categories we're going to go through. Pre-recording tips before you actually do the webinar. And then I have 4 different parts to a webinar, by the way. Intro, the core teaching, the transition, and then the sale. And so I have tips for each of those phases in the webinar. I'm excited. Let's dive in. Let's kick it off with the pre-recording tips. Yes, do create slides, PowerPoint, Google Slides, Keynote, whatever. Don't deviate away from that. They work for a reason. It's a great format for teaching and selling things. In fact, yes, that's my 2-week-old when she was born. This is actually my most recent pod course webinar where I teach about podcasting efficiency, and then I sell a pod course offer at the end of it. I'm actually going to be using this as an example throughout this entire thing. Tip number 2 would be to create a miniature workbook or a worksheet or something to give attendees before they actually show up. And there's 2 reasons to do this. This is actually my thank you page for that webinar, by the way. Number 1, it's just a helpful tool so they can take notes, they can learn better, right? You can present the important things from your webinar on the worksheet, whatever. But more than that, it helps get them on the webinar. Show up rates is what webinar presenters care a lot about. People register, getting them to actually show up can be actually really hard. Or watch the replay or something like that. And giving them a little resource, a printable or worksheet or whatever that is, can actually help with that. And going back to my thank you page right here, you can see I have a little video up. This video is for one purpose, and that is to get them excited about coming on the webinar. It says like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for attending. I'm really excited to start diving into podcasting. We are going to go through X, Y, and Z really quick. And I promise by the end of this webinar, I will have you result. And be sure to show up, download this worksheet, but I also have a few more bonuses and I'll give you my slides. And I even have a special offer that I'm going to present to you. So be sure to check your email, add this to your calendar. The point of all that stuff is to get them to show up on the webinar, to get them excited to actually show up and learn the things. And I'm teasing what we're going to go over, right? And I'm presenting this little mini workbook. That's a crucial success tip. Do whatever you can, send reminder emails, of course. Everybody does this for the most part. Like we're starting in an hour, we're starting in 15 minutes. You can do texts, you can do Facebook messages. It depends on what software you use. I use Webinar Jam and EverWebinar, and it's super easy. But definitely do all that stuff to get them on the webinar. And the last pre-recording tip I have here is to prepare. Actually do a dry run, a test run of your entire webinar, start to finish. Like get your lights set up, get your mic set up, figure out what you're going to be saying. It's so crucial that you make your slides. You think you know what you're going to say, but go ahead and do a test run. You will encounter hiccups. You'll be like, oh my gosh, I need to change this slide. I need to add a slide. I need to delete a slide. Inevitably, every time I do this, I think I'm done. And then I try and go through the whole thing, start to finish. I don't record it. I don't present it. It's just for me. I will always be changing stuff, always. And by the way, use Presenter View, especially if you have a second monitor, or I actually use my iPad. I connect my iPad to my Mac, and then I use Presenter View, which allows you to see your notes, like you can type in text notes or whatever that remind you of what to say, but your audience won't see that. And you can also preview your upcoming slide, which is really cool. I always use Presenter View. You might have to figure out how to do that based on your streaming software and your webinar software, etc. But if you have that opportunity, do it, right? Prepare for the webinar. All right, let's move on. Next up, I want to talk about the intro to your webinar, like the first 3 to 5 minutes, because it's actually incredibly important. Tip number 1 would be to don't stop talking. Seriously, no dead air. People need to know that you are there on the other side of the screen, and you need to keep things moving. You need to keep them engaged. Engagement is one of the most important things you can do for a webinar to teach people, to get sales. Like if they're not engaged, you don't have their attention, you don't have any of that stuff. So do not stop talking. For example, oh my gosh, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you are here. I've got my coffee. I'm ready to go. I'm excited to talk about podcasting. We are going to start in about 3 or 4 minutes, but in that time, while people are still coming on the webinar, feel free to say hello in chat. Tell me where you're viewing this from all over the world. And also, I'd love to hear you guys talk about where are you at on your podcasting journey. This is going to help me produce a better webinar. Again, we'll start just here in a few minutes, but go ahead and type out in chat, like, are you a total beginner or whatever? I have some amazing tips for producing a podcast quickly and easily. We're going to talk about all that stuff. I'll give you these slides. If you didn't download the workbook already, check your email. I sent it to you. I got a bunch of great stuff coming up. I know you're going to learn a lot. It's going to be exciting, and I'm just super excited about it. Thank you all for coming. I'm excited you guys are here. You guys see what I did right there? I did not shut up, which is actually surprisingly hard to do if you're not a natural blabber like I am. But don't stop talking. That's my tip. People need to know you're there, and you need to be energetic, which is actually tip number 2 here. Be energetic. I mentioned coffee. If you don't drink coffee, take some chocolate before you start recording. Do some jumping jacks, do some push-ups, whatever you got to do to get the blood flowing and bring the energy. You have PowerPoint, people are just staring at their computer screen, maybe they're at home, but they're gearing up for a 30-minute, 60-minute, 90-minute webinar or longer, whatever that is. You have to bring the energy. You should be exhausted by the time you are done with a 2-hour webinar. You should be exhausted. Bring the energy, stay excited, smile, stay positive. That sounds a little bit corny, but that's actually incredibly important for reaching people and engaging people on a webinar. Random tip, you might see this done a lot. I ask people to close their tabs. Now, of course, not everybody's going to do this, but some people might. You want their attention. Here's what I usually say to them. I'll be like, hey, I want you guys to do me a quick favor. I work my tail off creating this webinar for you guys. I am bringing you my absolute A game. I'm going to teach you the best I possibly can, but I need a favor from you as well. Do me a favor. Go ahead and close out all the other tabs. I know you got a bajillion of them open. Don't lie. I know you're over there on ESPN.com or, Netflix. Close all your tabs just for a little while. I promise this will be worth your while. I am going to teach you amazing things, but I can't do that if you're, watching The Office in your other tabs. So close out the other tabs, give me your attention, and I will give you lots of value in return or something like that. Let's just kind of make it fun, but it's actually a really important part to try and keep them engaged, and just go ahead and tell them, close out of the tabs. This is only an hour. This is only 2 hours, or whatever it is. The next step would be to actually get them to post in chat. That's one way to bring them back to the tab if they're on another tab, but it's also just fun and engaging, especially if you have a decent sized audience, more than a couple of other people on the webinar. Just getting them to interact and they can see other people typing in. That's great social proof, and it leads to more engagement. So you can ask them simple questions. You can also just be kind of clever and funny. One thing I do on my webinars, it's just who's ready to start? Give me a shut up Pete in chat. Everybody in the chat, just say, shut up Pete, let's go. Or something like that. I'll tell them to do something funny, keep it clever, keep it lighthearted and engaging, but get them to post in chat. It's good for engagement, it's good for social proof, and it just keeps them tuned into what you're doing. And the last tip I have for the intro is actually going to apply to just about every part of your webinar, and that is to tease them. Not in a completely negative way, but there is an art to teasing something that's coming up. I'm going to give you a bonus. We're going to talk about this in a second. I say that all the time. I even say that in my YouTube videos. I've said it a couple of minutes ago, I think. We're going to talk about that in just a second. That's teasing something, and it's keeping people tuned in to wait for it. Your future pacing, you're telling them this is coming up. You're going to learn this. I'm going to give you this. Something beneficial, something they want. Talk about that stuff and tease it. And you can even see my slide here. I say stay to the end. I do have these slides I'll give to you, but I also have some other little bonus offers and it's completely free. I'll just give you the links to them, and I know they're going to help you on their journey. I'll give you those at the end of this webinar. And then I actually do this sort of teasing all throughout this webinar. I'm constantly talking about, in just a second, I'm actually going to show you how to blah, blah, blah. And then coming up, we're going to actually blah, 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 and you'll see this firsthand, all that different stuff. It's teasing them, it's keeping them engaged. Don't do it too much and too obvious, but there's a fine line. This is definitely an art and a science. You'll have to figure out how to do this stuff on your own, but it can be a great way to keep people engaged. Okay, let's dive into the core part of your webinar, the teaching. Number 1 would be to don't teach everything you know. It's overwhelming. You're not doing a 48-hour webinar intensive. You're doing a 2-hour webinar, or you're doing a 30-minute webinar. You don't have time to teach them every single thing about your topic and dive through every single little detail. I like to tell people, and I've heard this from others as well, I didn't make this up, give people the why, the what, but not the how. Let me give you an example of this. I do actually suggest doing a little bit of bio, here's who I am. My name is Pete McPherson. I started podcasting back in 2009. It didn't really work out. I hated it. I quit. I actually started over 50 plus blogs and online businesses over the years when I was a corporate accountant, most of which were complete failures. And then one time I actually took a startup job because I wanted to blog full time, and I got fired. I got laid off after one paycheck with a 2-week-old. It was very stressful. Yes, tears were shed, but it actually led me to diving in full time to Do You Even Blog, my podcast right here. And I was actually really pleased with what I was able to do with the podcast. I was able to make money. I was able to just, make half of, mid 5 figures in the first several months. The point is, podcasting has 100% changed my life, and I don't even have 1 million downloads. I have my podcast to thank for my entire business. It has changed my life. Okay, what did I do just there? I am building up not only authority, but I'm giving people a why. Why should they pay attention to me? Why should they pay attention to this webinar? I'm talking about podcasting, right? I'm teaching people how to start a podcast in an efficient way and in a way that grows their business. Why should they care about that? Because podcasting has changed my life. If it weren't for the Do Your Blog podcast, you wouldn't be watching this YouTube video. And I'm trying to tell them that. I'm giving them the why. One more part to this. In this particular webinar, after I say that, I'm like, okay, let me actually just blow your mind for a second. Look at this. There are over 500 million blogs on the internet as of early 2021. Over 31 million YouTubes. How many podcasts? 1.7 million. And almost more impressively, that number is skyrocketed from only a couple of years ago. It was literally 500,000 in 2019, and then 2 years later, we're up to 1.7 million. So my point is, the time to start a podcast is today, right now. It's never been more opportunistic to jump into podcasting. Okay, so again, what did I do there? I'm leading people to why they should start a podcast, why it's important that they watch the rest of the webinar, why they should listen to me. There's a bunch of whys in here. And not only that, but why do they need to buy PodCourse? Again, I'm hyping them up. I'm convincing them something. We're going to talk about that in a second. It's actually from Russell Brunson. The why. And then the next part is the what. And this is your core teaching. Tell people what to do. If you're teaching people about podcasting, I go through the remainder of my slides here are actually the what. By the way, look at this. The best news, I'm about to break things down nice and simple and get you podcasting in no time. What was that? That was me teasing what's coming up. Are you ready to begin? Give me a yes in chat, or give me a yes, Pete. Enough already. Stop rambling. Give me a stop rambling in chat or something like that, right? I'm getting people to engage. And then I go through the core teaching. I'm talking about these 3 beginner mistakes. I'm talking about mics, and then I'm talking about what I call the MVPs, which is my minimum viable podcast. This is the what. I'm walking through people what to do in order to start a podcast, in order to launch their podcast. I'm giving them some best practices here. I'm telling them a lot of what. Here's what you should do. Do this, do this. Here's what to do. Here are the steps involved. I'm doing a lot of what. But what I am not doing, and this is very important, is showing them how. This is not just so you can sell them products. This is because you don't want to overwhelm people. Quite frankly, if I tried to tell people exactly how to start a podcast and I started opening up my editing software, I'd just lose people, right? It's an hour-and-a-half long webinar. I don't have time for that. They don't have time for that. It's technical. They may or may not be taking notes. They may or may not be at work with other things going on. I can't show them how to run the compressor and then export an MP3 file and upload to Auphonic and then put it into their podcast host, and that would take forever. They don't need that. They may think they want that from me right now, but they don't. They actually don't, because there's a lot more involved than that. You should not be telling them all the intricate details of how to do fill in the blank. Whatever topic you're teaching them about, you should be giving them the why. Why is this important? Why should they be listening to you? Why do they need to pay attention and actually implement said strategies or whatever? And the what. Here is what you need to do, right? For your strategy, for your podcasting, for your parenting, for your food, whatever your webinar is on. Give them the why and the what, but not the how. The how is your paid product. The how is PodCourse, where it's 91 HD videos completely on demand. I've categorized out all the different phases of starting a podcast. You can jump right to where you are in the journey, and then I will teach you exactly, step by step, in very simple details. I break down everything. I will teach you exactly how to start and grow your podcast. And it'll take hours to go through. I'm not gonna lie, but that's the how, right? The why, the what, give them on the webinar. The how is your product. The next step I'm actually going to steal from Russell Brunson. He put this in a way that I really liked. Your job isn't necessarily to teach them everything they need to know on a webinar. Your job on the webinar is to convince your audience of one thing. And again, you're trying to get sales, I assume. You're trying to sell your products or whatever. You need to convince them of one thing. And basically, for me and PodCourse, it's that I need to convince people that podcasting can actually be brutally easy and simple and fast. If people don't believe me when I say that, I need to convince them of that. If I can convince people on my webinars that podcasting is actually, it can be a joke, right? With the tools in 2021, podcasting can take you minutes, not hours and days, and can actually grow your business, and you can reach more people and all that great stuff. Then to convince people that podcasting is awesome and that there's massive opportunity there, and it can actually be insanely simple and fast and easy. If I can convince people of that, by the time I get around to talking about PodCourse, I'm I've convinced people that. They're okay, well, show me how. That is what PodCourse is. Your job on the webinar isn't to teach everything you know, it's to convince them of one thing that they need to be convinced of in order to buy your product. If they're not convinced of that, why would they buy your product? Why would they buy PodCourse? as opposed to all the other podcasting stuff out there is because I have convinced them podcasting can be very fast and simple and not take up a lot of brain cells. If I convince them of that, I have them for PodCourse. That's your job. Don't teach them everything. Convince them of one thing. Thank you, Russell Brunson, for that one. And my last tip here, I really stink at following myself for the core content, is not actually to just take your time. Like a 2-hour webinar, it's actually normal. It feels weird to me because I'm used to YouTube and I'm used to be like, here's what we're gonna do today, guys, blah, 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 blah. That actually can overwhelm people as well. Believe it or not, I don't see any engagement increase when I talk faster and when I move faster and I do all these brutal things. Take your time. I have to convince myself to do this, by the way. I'm preaching right now, but I actually stink at this. Just take your time. Right? Just talk normal, talk casually, go through all the steps that you need to do on your webinar. Like, don't feel free like you have to cut it under 45 minutes or even in like an hour. You don't. You can take your time. Let's jump into the sales stuff. Actually, before we get to you actually trying to sell your product, there's the transition. How do we go from talking about the core content, teaching, or whatever it is, to actually trying to sell something? It's actually pretty tough. There's an art and a science. Luckily, this is actually really easy, and I'll show you some different stuff I've learned from a bunch of people. It can actually be really awkward for people. So I recommend this. There's actually 3 tips. Number 1, you still have energy, right? I told you, you should be exhausted by the time you do this. Watching people go from teaching about something to actually trying to sell something, you can actually see people literally start to back away from the microphones, talk softer and more timid because they're timid about selling or whatever. That can't be you. You have to keep up the energy and enthusiasm and the passion whenever you start talking about selling your products. You have to. And this transition is the perfect place to remind yourself to do that. I have a sticky note sometimes that I'll put up to be like, keep the energy or something like that. Tip number 2, I love this slide right here. This is the perfect transition. Okay, what have we learned today? Well, we blah, 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 blah. This is the rundown. Well, the rundown is everything that you covered in the previous 30 minutes or whatever the teaching part was. Just tell them, okay, we learned why your audience doesn't really care about much beyond the MVP. We learned that podcasting doesn't have to be hard and complicated. By the way, tip. What am I doing here? I'm convincing them of something. We learned that it just has to be valuable and fun and engaging. I also taught you the 4 steps to the MVPs. We talked about the basic launch steps, and then we talked about how to get your first podcast sponsorship. That's the next step here, the rundown. Just give them a, what have we learned? The next thing, I'm actually, again, stealing from Russell Brunson, who probably stole it from other people. Let me ask you a question. That's it. In fact, I don't actually have this slide in here, but I usually say it right over here. I might even add this to my notes. Let me ask you a question. And the question is future pacing, right? Okay, let me ask you a question. How would you like to have your podcast up and running a week from now? 1 week from today? You don't know anything. How would you like to be reaching more people starting next week? Well, I have a product for that. It's basically, let me ask you a question. People always start to tune in when you say that, by the way, because they're like, what's the question? Ask them a question about what they want. What do they want in the future? For podcasters, it's like growing my blog audience, growing my business or whatnot. And quite frankly, they don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing it. So this is my thing on this webinar is let me ask you a question. I know that you want to start a podcast. What if I told you that I could get you up and running within a week? All right. With no brain cells. What if I had that? Well, it turns out I do have that, and it's called PodCourse. And then, by the way, I didn't actually add this to my notes, but another thing I really like to say, and that I've heard a lot of other people say as well, is can I tell you about this? Can I pitch it to you? Literally asking people to pitch to them, asking permission to sell them something that actually opens people's minds like you would not believe. And some people might leave your webinar at this point, and that's okay. They weren't going to buy your thing anyways. But for those who might be interested, it just opens up that now I'm talking about sales. This is not awkward for you. It's not awkward for me. I don't have to be timid now. I'm not trying to snake oil you into anything. I actually want to tell you about this product. I've spent a lot of time and effort and energy on it. Can I tell you about it? If so, hit me up with a yes in chat. I literally do that all the time. I'm like, can I pitch you this? After I go through the rundown, what have we learned today? And then I said, let me ask you a question. How would you like to start podcasting like ASAP for not a lot of energy? I can get you up and running. How would you like that? Would you want that? Does that sound like something you would want? Well, I have a product called PodCourse. And at this point in the webinar, I would actually like to tell you about it. So I'm going to ask for your permission. Can I tell you about this product? Hit me up with a yes in chat if that's cool. And I'm just going to keep on going. Okay, that's your transition right now. And now we're into the sales part. And let me ask you a question. No, I'm just kidding. I was going to go through like a full pitch here on like, but if you want to learn how to sell things, you got to go buy my 995 product. Nah, I'm just kidding. Let's get back. And my secret first tip would be to keep up the energy. Again, my second little tip here would be to actually create a landing page just for your webinar attendees. Now, I like to deliver some goodies, my free webinar bonuses, which are not only the slides, but also a little bit of a workbook and some other cool stuff in Google Drive. So I literally created this page, podcourse.com/webinar, and I linked to their goodies right up top. They can go download that stuff and There it is. And this is just an excuse to also have your bonus offers down here. As you can see, the rest of this page is the sales page, but not only the general sales page for PodCourse, which I'm selling them, it talks about the bonuses that I offer on the webinar. I offer a few bonuses here. It's also time limited. You can see I got my deadline down there, deadline timer, and also the free stuff. So just go ahead and create a dedicated landing page. It's a great way to deliver your bonuses, your free stuff, as well as go ahead and put your offer there. And if you want to link to a bigger sales page, you probably can, or you can just do what I did and just put a lot of stuff like right here. My next tip is actually a cop out. There are a ton of different ways to sell via a webinar. What you talk about your product, different closes, if you will, sticking on the Russell Brunson theme. I actually have two that I'm going to tell you today. There's a ton of these, right? There's a million different ways you could do this. I generally like to just start with my product like I showed you a second ago. Here is PodCourse. This is my step-by-step blah, blah, blah. Here's the product. Here's what it is. That's what I talk about first. I literally have these like little mock-ups. There we go. And then I immediately jump into breaking out all the different features. Now, let's talk about this for just a second. This is actually a big tip. What you're doing is telling them everything they're going to get. You're building up value in their head, ideally, that is worth more than the price you're asking. Russell Brunson, again, calls this the stack, but a ton of people talk about this. I'm going to give you this feature right here. This is worth $1,000. I'm also going to give you this feature right here. That's worth $300. I normally charge $300 for this, but I'm also gonna throw in 3 bonuses today. Bonus number 1 is this, that I usually sell for $500. Bonus number 2, this amount. Bonus number 4, this amount. It's called a stack because Russell is like, you're stacking all these different features, parts of your program, bonuses that you're gonna offer, whatever that stuff is, and you're giving them a value. This stuff is worth $1,200. Now, how much am I gonna charge you for that? Obviously, I'm not gonna charge you $1,200. I usually charge you $500 for PodCourse, but I'm not even gonna do that. I'm not even gonna charge you $400. I'm actually going to bring the price down to $247, $347. There's their price. You're stacking up all these valuable things and building up expectations. You're actually anchoring a price in their head, by the way, to get fancy. And then you're giving them a discount, the lower price or the actual price, the retail price, whatever the price is, stacking all the features. Now, one more tip is to not only talk about the features, for example, let's go back and look at what I do here. Lifetime access to PodCourse, $495. That's what I charge right there. Well, the way I will talk about this is I will actually say, we talk about features and benefits in sales and copywriting and marketing all the time. I like this. Feature means benefit. The feature is you get access to all my training videos. What does that mean? That means you will have access to these instantaneously for the lifetime and you can start wherever you want. Basically, what is the feature and what does that mean? Basically, that's a great way to talk about features versus benefits. See what I'm doing right here? I'm stacking this. Lifetime access to the private PodCourse community. That means you'll actually be able to go in there and post questions and get help fast when you need it. I don't want you stuck. This means getting technical questions answered as soon as possible so that you can get up and running as quick as possible. Feature means benefits. One more example here. I like to include bonuses, by the way. I think everybody should try and break out their products and their different bonuses. But wait, that's not all. I do have a special take action bonus for you guys. It's 24 hours only. Bonus number 1, 10 Audio Hero credits. That means you don't have to go pay for stock royalty music and sound effects and background music for your intros and outros in your podcast. I will give you some credits. 10 Audio Hero credits means you don't have to go pay for that stuff. I got a total value down here, by the way. There's my slide for Audio Hero, and then I'll say, and the next bonus is 1 hour podcast. That's a $47 value. I'm gonna give you my podcast marketing playbook. This means you don't have to go scouring the internet in order to find ways to download your show. I have a ton of them there. They're categorized, they're organized. That means it's gonna be super simple for you to look in there and get ideas. You can see I'm using the word means a lot. That's a good way to transition from talking about features versus benefits. And you can see I'm just doing the stack, right? I'm just adding the stuff up. I'm talking about it right here. I list it out. I have increased the total value of my slides, and then I talk about the bonus. And then I stack again. And I am actually gonna throw in my content repurposing course, content everywhere. This means you will now be reaching people on blogs, YouTube videos, social media, in not a lot of time. I break down all the different tools, which means you won't have to spend a whole lot of time and energy repurposing your podcast content. I'll walk you through all that in this course. Feature means benefits. I'll talk about the total value. That is over $1,000 in value right there. I don't offer this as a bonus anywhere else. I really don't. So you're probably asking yourself, Pete, how much does it cost? By the way, another thing you can do is you can't talk about like, I have personally paid over $12,000 for podcasting courses and trainings and a mentorship and consultants over the past 10 years. Like, I've spent well over $10,000 getting all the information to put in this course. $10,000. I could probably charge that, because if you buy PodCourse and you get one sponsorship for $1,000, that pays for this $500 investment right there. But I'm actually going to do you one better. I'm not going to charge you $500 because I want you taking action today. You watched this webinar. I want action takers here. This is what I just talked about, by the way. Like, what is this worth? Tell me, would it be worth it to you to pay $500 for this? If it got you one sponsorship for $500, that would pay for PodCourse right there. What's it worth to you? $10,000? I built up a 6-figure business on podcasting. Would it be worth $10,000 to pay for PodCourse? Would it be worth $1,000? Of course it would. Today, and for the next 24 hours only, I'm gonna give it to you for $347. Basically, I built up the entire stack. I talked about all my features, and then I'm bringing it back down to here's what the price is. $347. And the last tip I have for you when it comes to sales and closing and stuff, again, this is not the only way you can do this or you should do it. This is just how I do it. A bunch of people do it like this. I definitely recommend you break out all the features. You do the stack, as Russell Brunson would say. But the next thing I like to do is literally show them what happens next. And you can do this before you do the stack that we just talked about, or you can do it after. And by the way, what happens next, meaning like, here's how you actually buy this. What I'll do is, here's what you do. Here's what happens next. So you'll go to podcourse.com/webinar, and you can actually get your free bonuses. I've included this stuff right here. You can actually go get my PodCourse podcast launch checklist, as well as the show notes, little training I have, and some other goodies. You can find that at podcourse.com/webinar. And if you want to join, you'll click any number of these like little buy buttons I got set up right here. This will take you to the checkout page. You'll enter in your payment info. I also have a payment plan if you want to break your payments out like that. You can add that content everywhere deal if you so desire. And then after you do this, you'll actually be taken straight away to your course. I'll send you an email that'll have your login information, your name and password. And I would usually have the actual course open, by the way. This is what you will see. Here is literally the checkout process. Walk people through it. It eliminates any errors or questions they might have about the checkout process, and also, quite frankly, just makes it more enticing, right? When they can actually see the product. I will literally open up PodCourse from the customer point of view, and I'll be like, here is the welcome intro. You're gonna click this video right here. It's gonna get you into the private community, and then you can jump into module 1 if you want. Or, you know, the way I've broken this out, you can jump over here. I'm also gonna email you these different tools and resources. This is where you can access your bonuses. This is where you can do this, like literally showing people. Here's what happens next. I just find that makes things really clear in people's heads. Here's what they're getting for the price. It's gonna happen instantaneously. Here's what the checkout process looks like. It just makes it that much easier for them to do business with you. They can see it. It's clear. They understand everything that's going to happen. If they pay you money, that's a great closing process, tactic, strategy, sale. 3 more things. Number 1, I actually have the notes I made for myself making this YouTube video available in the description below. It's free. I don't want your email address even. Actually, I do want your email address, but I won't ask for it for this. You'll also see down there a bunch of other videos on setting up an automated webinar funnel. And I got my other funnel videos, my other marketing automation and webinar videos down there. Go check that stuff out. And the last thing, hashtag YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Leave me some love in the comments, man. I love hearing from you guys. And I'll see you next time on the Do You Even Blog YouTube channel. I love you guys. Happy webinaring. Adios.